U.S. Investigator, House of Representatives. Bill Walter.
And Carol Leap, investigator. Mr. Waters, I wonder if you would cover some of the issues that I've outlined there for you. Briefly give us your personal history.
Okay, my full name is William S. Walter. Spelling of last name is W-A-L-T-E-R. My date of birth is 3/9/42. I was born in Effingham, Illinois. I was employed by the Federal Bureau of Investigation in the New Orleans office from approximately June of 1961 until July of 1965. My areas of responsibility at the Bureau were clerical in nature. I was a GS5 security clerk working the 12:15 midnight until 8:15 in the morning shift. I was the only employee on duty at the New Orleans office for that period of time. I attended Tulane University in the daytime, and it was not uncommon for the Bureau field offices to have a mature college student working full-time for the Bureau and being the only employee on duty. The areas of specific responsibilities at night were to handle all incoming and outgoing communications and to notify supervisors depending upon the violation or the nature of the incoming communication. And I was to notify the supervisors if action was necessary during the nighttime and early morning hours.
In that capacity of handling incoming communications, did you, on November the 17th, 1963, receive communications from the FBI headquarters?
Yes, it was a Sunday. I was, again, the only employee on duty. Received a conference teletype originating from Washington and directed as conference to all SACs, meaning all special agent charges of all offices at this particular teletype. As I recall, came into the New Orleans office, was received at the same time by the Memphis office, Dallas office, Mobile office, and the teletype was directed to our offices sort of as a movement teletype, indicating that President Kennedy was going to be traveling to Dallas, and that the information had been received somewhere within the Bureau that there would be possibly an attempt to assassinate him sometime during the trip to Dallas. It was asking meaning the teletype, requested that all field officers that received that teletype to contact informants of one nature or another to determine if any additional information could be developed as to any basis for such a threat being made. I received the teletype on the 17th and then took the information, checked our indices files, contacted the supervisors in charge of those kinds of cases, whereby I was instructed to contact agent personnel, and I so noted on the teletype.
Do you recall the identity of the individuals that you contacted?
I recall some of them: Wall, Ernest Wall, Cack, Milton Cack, Thurman Bogan, of course, H.G. Maynor was the special agent in charge. He was contacted. Gilmore, I believe, was contacted.
Did you call the SAC personally?
Yes.
By phone that evening?
Right.
And you read the contents of the teletype to him?
Yes, I did.
You remember what his reaction was?
No, it wasn't an alarming kind of situation. I guess guess in the matter of the 3 years I worked at the Bureau, I must have woken the SAC up, awakened them maybe 100 times of what I considered much more serious teletypes than this one. This one, to me, was just information, see what you had in your field office concerning that.
I see. What did you do afterwards? Did you file the teletype?
Well, it was a procedure that you would check the indices to determine whether or not there was a file opened at that time. And if there was, you would match the teletype with the file and attach it to the cover of the file, and then you would route that or place it on the desk of the supervisor that handled those matters, and the supervisor in the morning would expect to have any of those kind of communications that came in during the night to be on his desk for his final procedures. He may route one copy to the agents that had the case assigned. In this case, there was no other information about with that caption, so it would be a new case, and so the teletype itself was placed on the SAC's desk the following morning with any other information that came in during that night.
Did you have occasion to speak with the special agent in charge or any of the agents to determine what response they gave to this particular telegram?
No. That morning, the teletype was just placed on the desk with the notations of who I call and the times I called them, and those types of instructions.
We'll terminate this interview to answer the telephone. Continuation of the interview. Mr. Walters, did you have occasion to observe a similar type of teletype, similar information at a later date? And if so, when was it?
I'm not following your question.
You received this particular teletype on the 17th.
Correct.
Now, let's move to November the 22nd. On this date, did you receive a similar teletype?
No, I didn't. There's a couple of things happened on the 22nd that may be of interest. First of all, that Kennedy was shot. I didn't work that day. It was my normal day off or night off. And my wife at that time was a stenographer, so she worked days. Because when Kennedy was shot, I went to the office just as I was going to have lunch with my wife anyway. I just came out of the barbershop. So when I got there, of course, the office talk was, I wonder if anybody in the New Orleans area had actually killed the president, or what happened to the teletype, what was taken, was there any positive information developed the week previous or 4 days previous to indicate that maybe somebody or people involved in the New Orleans area had done the killing, and it was almost instantaneous that the information came down both on news media and to the Bureau's offices that Oswald was the person that was being accused of the assassination, and that he was in the New Orleans area for a long time, and there was talk around the office of who knew him and what relationship he had with the Bureau. There was a teletype that came in on the afternoon of the 22nd asking the field offices to determine if there was any leads or develop any circumstances that would indicate that there was some sort of conspiracy. And this teletype was in somewhat the same form as the teletype that came down on the 17th.
I see. Did you make inquiry or check the files to determine if any response had been given to the teletype of the 17th?
Yeah, the file was, of course, the indices card would indicate what file it went in, and there was 2 or 3 of us that were close friends there that weren't agent personnel that went back to pull the 62-0 file that the teletype indicated was there, and the copy was there. There were no related documents as to whether or not there was any contact with anyone, or the informant contact sheets were not there and probably wouldn't have been there, and I don't recall seeing where or looking for them or even discussing it anymore. The teletype was there, assigned a serial number and a page number in that 62-0 file, which was sort of a catch-all kind of information file. It probably, looking, hindsight, it probably should have been in an 89-0 file, which was threats against the government. And one of the disputes, I think the Bureau said, well, he's wrong about that because if he saw the teletype the day of the assassination, when it came in on the 17th, then it would have been in an 89 file and not a 62 file. Well, I know what I know and I know what I saw. And when I've had an opportunity to look at some of the documents that have been released by the Bureau under the FOI Act, there were a lot of documents in 62-0 file that were related to the Kennedy assassination. So I don't know how they washed that. I can explain that their defense is that the file, that copy shouldn't have been in that file. Make a long story short, I went back the following evening. Of course, at that time, they had actually opened an assassination file. Went back, and the copy was out of the 62-0 file, which was not uncommon. It would be transferred then to go with the case file. And I never saw it in the case file. So I assumed that back then there was documents all over the office. There were squads of agents dealing with different aspects of the case. And it would take some time for all that paperwork to get caught up and actually get put in the file. In some cases, if it was a fast-moving kind of case, they may have an inch thick of material on top of the file that would eventually be filed by a clerical employee according to the dates and times that the information was received, would be assigned a page number in that file. So it didn't alarm me that when the next night, of course, I'd worked 2 extra days and worked long hours. We sent teletypes. As I recall, one of them was maybe 50-page conference teletype that a lot of us had, the clerical people had time to sit around and discuss what this was going to mean to the country, what it was going to mean to our office, who had responsibility for Oswald. So there was a lot of scuttlebutt in the office about, I wonder what happened to the teletype. Oh, I'm sure it's over here. I wonder if anything was developed. I wonder where the agents contacted, which informants, I wondered about the fact that Oswald had a security index number, which would indicate that he was also an informant, had been contacted by the Bureau, and as far as the New Orleans office was concerned, he had an informant status with our office. And the agents that contacted him, as I recall, there were more than one. And so there was a lot of talk going on in the office about what it was going to mean.
So when did you have occasion to see this original, the teletype on the 17th again? When did you see that document?
On the 17th again?
The teletype that came in on the 17th. When did you see this teletype again?
Well, the last time I saw that teletype in official bureau capacity was on the afternoon of the 22nd, after the assassination. And that was when I located it in the 62-0 file, just out of curiosity to see whether or not anybody had developed any information of a conspiracy nature.
I see. Did you make a copy of that teletype?
I took some very good notes and have access to some copies of copies. There's always this play on word. What is a copy? An original copy. The teletype is a 2-copy machine. Of course, we had Xerox machines there too. So I don't want to get into specifics what it is that I am able to remember in detail what the teletype says, but I can provide you with notes of copies that would tell you what the teletype said.
In the previous conversation I had with you, Mr. Walters, you indicated that you had a copy of the teletype received on the 17th. Mm-hmm. Is that correct?
Well, let me go again. What is a copy? I have copies of copies.
Would you explain it to me?
Well, I'm concerned about whether or not I've been threatened by Mr. Adams with the FBI previously when I made this information available back in 1966 as to whether or not I had in my possession any government documents. And there was that technicality is what the government document, whether or not I had copied notes from original documents, or whether or not I had a Xerox copy of an original document, or whether or not I had an original document. Without discussing it with my attorney, I would not want to put on tape any information as to whether or not I have notes, copies, or originals of copies.
I can understand that. Mr. Wallace, if the congressional committee, issue a subpoena for any documents you might have pertaining to this teletype on the 17th, would you respond to
Yes.
that subpoena? Could you indicate to me at this time whether or not it would be a copy? I know this is, play on word, but
I have some documents. Some of them I have a right to have. Some of them I got in the Freedom of Information, my Freedom of Information file. Some of them I took notes of documents. Some of them I know of areas where their copies can be obtained. And so anything that I would know about the incident of Kennedy assassination, including Oswald and including Bureau procedures, if I would be asked under oath and an official capacity, I would be more than happy to give them everything I have.
Okay. Now let's go on to the second issue I'd like to discuss, and that was whether or not Oswald was an informant. Could you enlighten me on that issue and how you came about the information?
I don't remember the exact sequence of events, and I'm sure that I don't want to get tied down because I did submit an interview in '67 with CBS, and I have a transcript of that. I'd much prefer to review that transcript to get the sequence of events. But as I recall now, after not talking about this for the last year and a half, and not really thinking about what came first, there was an occasion where Oswald was arrested in New Orleans, and that Oswald was interviewed by an agent before the assassination, and that, of course, when that kind of information comes in, you have to file it according to whether or not there's another file, or whether or not a file was open. Well, at that time, there was a file number assigned to Oswald. I believe it was a file number 134. And going through the procedures of checking the indices, I had found that that file was not in an area that was accessible to clerical employees. It was more of a security informant type file that would be locked up in the SAC safe. So I had to give the memorandum requesting an agent contact Oswald. I had to give it to the Saturday duty agent, telling him that yes, we had a file on Oswald, but no, I didn't have it and I couldn't find it for him. So he had that information when he went to Oswald. I later found out that was an informant classification. Then, of course, after the assassination, we checked the indices on Oswald, and there was some indices card. At that time, there were a couple of numbers on the card showing we had more than one file assigned him, or his name appeared in more than one category. Again, this was an informant file, and then I had access during the night. I believe it was the night after the assassination. I think it was a Saturday night. I had access to the file cabinet that these were filed in, and I pulled it and saw his file, just the top copy, that he had been contacted by Agent DeBruys as an informant. Now, whether Oswald knew he was an informant, I don't know. And of course, the file wouldn't indicate that, and I didn't read it in any depth. It was a very thin file that showed very little activity, and there was no payments of any kind paid informant.
Let's see. Then the indices you checked on the day of his arrest, reflected that he not only had a security file of them, but he also was listed as an informant.
He had been contacted, and the file number in our office was an informant file number assigned to informants.
In other words, the embassy card reflected several file numbers.
Well, the first time it was one file number, and then, of course, after the assassination, as I recall, there were some other file numbers, not including the 89 classification, which was the assassination file number. That wasn't on the indices card now. I guess if you go pull the indices card on Oswald now, he may have 20 or 30 file numbers.
Could you identify individuals who could support your statements, substantiate your statements?
Well, there were clerical employees. There were a couple of them that we talked about it. My ex-wife and I talked about it in great length. There were the agents that
What is her present name?
Her name is Covert, C-O-V. Covert. Is it Covert? C-O-V-E-R-T, I believe is the spelling of the last name. George Covert. C-O-L-V-E-R-T or C-O-V-E-R-T. I think it's C-O-V-E-R-T. George Covert, and her name is Sharon. Her mother and father live at Randolph Air Force Base in San Antonio under the name James R. Johnson. And I understand that she lives somewhere in New Jersey now, Plainsfield, New Jersey, where her husband's an intern at a hospital, I think Muhlenberg Hospital. But I haven't talked with her since 1969.
You were divorced in 1969.
Oh, we were divorced in 1968, 67, 68.
But she was substantiated.
Well, I haven't told. I understand Dan Rather contacted her after I submitted to the interview with CBS in 1976, whatever it was, 77, and he says that she did. But I haven't talked with her, communicated in any way since about a year after the divorce.
What were the names of the clerks?
Well, I'll give you these, but these guys are really have indicated to me that they're very unhappy being brought into this thing. Roy Simon, S-I-M-O-N, I believe he still lives in New Orleans, and Tom McCurley, who's with a bank in Jackson, Mississippi, in the computer center. These guys can't afford attorneys and don't want to be brought into any position where they would have to take a stand in one way or another against the Bureau or make notoriety, or they become public attention of any kind. So, and they've indicated to me, I think the Rather had talked to him, a couple other House investigators have talked to him, and they were pretty upset about it. I understand that they haven't given any support to what I say is what happened. I understand that they're simply saying they don't remember anything, and that no, they don't remember a teletype, and no, they don't want to talk about it. I understand that's their official position. I understand the Bureau has also gotten an affidavit from them that they don't know. One of the problems with both of them was that in 1968, when this information became public, the Bureau went to them and made them sign an affidavit, or asked them to sign an affidavit telling them what happened, or asking what happened. In 68, it wasn't very popular to take the kind of position to stand it is to say anything bad about the Bureau. So they signed an affidavit saying that they didn't know anything about it. So if they were to come back in 70 and 77 when they were asked again, then the Bureau was waving that affidavit they signed in 68 in their face. And it created some problems with them. I talked to one of them, I haven't talked to Roy Simon. I talked to McCurley in 1976. And the only reason I talked to him because one of the investigators that called me back and said, "Boy, this guy really was mad at you. You understand you owe him $600. We had a sailboat together, and the thing got busted up, and I had to sell it at a loss, but he felt that $600 was what my share of the boat that I never paid for. And I didn't realize that, and I didn't have any idea that I owed him. So I called him and told him I was sending him a check. And I talked to his wife also, and Tom's position was he didn't want to talk about the assassination at all. That was putting him under a lot of pressure, both in his job and his family life, and that he had already told the Bureau that he didn't know anything about it, but that he didn't care much to talk about it. And his wife told me that she had had a long talk with him. He remembers all the information, but he didn't want to say it. And I told her, I said, well, I'll have you subpoenaed. And then the more I thought about it, they had a retarded young baby, and the guy was, not making any money. I said, well, the last thing he needs is additional harassment. Because this absolutely doesn't mean anything. That the Oswald file, the fact that he was an informant, doesn't mean anything. I know the kind of informant that he was. I feel I know the kind of informant he was, and it's just embarrassing to the FBI to be able to admit that they had contacted Oswald and asked him information and recorded that information as if he was an informant. And then he ends up killing the president. And the teletype is simply a movement teletype that may have, the contents of which may have been developed for any number of reasons. Maybe the note that was destroyed in Dallas had something to do with the origination of the teletype. There was other information going around the country around the dates of the 15th through the 20th that would indicate that maybe the FBI should have been concerned about some kind of attempt on Kennedy, and in fact they were with the teletype of the 17th. So now more and more of that information is coming out, and it doesn't mean anything to me. I believe Al was a lone assassin, and there was no conspiracy of any kind. And the teletype and the fact that Oswald was an informant is simply going to just add somewhat of a cover-up cloud at the Bureau that they only said and told information that would support that they had done everything they could do.
Let's see. Do you have any additional questions, Bob? What documents, I know you've stated you really don't care to identify the documents that you have in your possession that might support your position.
Let me get one thing straight about this, supporting my position. I don't think that I have one document that can support my position. I think that the Bureau is perfectly able and capable of taking anything I have and saying just what they've said about the notes that I've given out to the news media. That wasn't the kind of teletype that would have been sent on those days, and we did an investigation, and we interviewed all these people he says that knows about it. They've all signed affidavits. We've searched our files, and we've done all these other things that the Bureau does. The only thing that they could prove is, let's say I had the original teletype right off the machine, and I handed it to you. And all they're going to say is, yep, that's the paper, and that's the type, and he's right, that's it. But then they're going to prove, well, it never was sent. Maybe he made it up. He sat there and typed it out. Okay, we'll admit that he typed it out. And that's the only way it could happen. It never was on the wire. We've checked all of our teletype logs and all of these things that they've been able to say over the past years. And they have said, and it's pretty convincingly that that's a phantom teletype. And I'm a liar, and that's fine with me. I have no axe to grind with the Bureau. But the point is, no matter what I have, they can't help me at all. He's not going to be able to help me at all. There are some documents that I had access to, and I copied and took copies of. Was sort of on a systems kind of thing. How does the FBI handle this kind of procedure? And I took that kind of stuff because I was interested, not because I felt that 1 year down the road that I was going to be able to use this information against the Bureau. I was a very inquisitive young college student who thought I was going to grow up and be Hoover's replacement. So I took some information from the Bureau's files that I thought, number one, was interesting, and number two, was relevant to me becoming a better, more qualified night employee for the Bureau and eventually becoming an agent. So, it's not like, okay, Bill Walter got this information because he knew it was going to be important to history, and then he's going to turn around, in 1968 and tell some investigators that. Because, 1978. 10 years ago I said this. In 1968, that was a long time ago. I talked about exactly what I'm talking about now.
to the FBI, you see. Right to the FBI, and right to the United States Attorney in New Orleans. So it's not like that. And then somebody said, well, why would you have good notes? Why would anybody like you take good notes? Well, I wasn't the only one that took good notes of that particular teletype. There were some other people that I've named that have taken good notes. And what they've done with those notes, I don't know. In my case, I kept all my notes. And the reason I took them, because we were concerned, as you know, that President Kennedy was a popular guy. And we were political science students, and Hale Boggs was on the Warren Commission. And someday we said, well, we'll ask Mr. Boggs what it is that about this teletype that made it so interesting. Well, it became apparent, I guess, in 2 or 3 weeks of the investigation that the FBI was going to not accept any blame for the assassination and not communicating with the Secret Service or Oswald's involvement with the Bureau or protection or interviewing. You know, it was a pretty well cut and dry thing. The Bureau is not going to get a black eye out of this thing at any cost. There was another teletype that they say they didn't send, and that I thought was important. It made me feel awful funny. It was about 6 or 7 days in the investigation, and the Bureau sent a teletype down our office accusing one of the agents that did some interviewing of screwing the interview up in that the information was not resolved, that they'd left too many loose ends, and they told him to re-interview the person and get all the answers. And then in the same teletype, they said, it doesn't conform with agent such and such who interviewed the same person. You guys get your stories together. Let's don't confuse the issue. Let's straighten this out. Let's change this to mean this. And that's exactly the words the teletype said. Change this in the following manner. So they would redo the interview, redo the 302s that were the interview forms that we used, and get them back in so that the FBI at that time, both in an office, in the New Orleans office, and in Washington, were making sure that everything that came through concerning the Kennedy assassination was all neatly organized and piled up so that there wasn't any area of blame, a loose area that maybe the Bureau could be blamed, and there wasn't any area that would lead to an embarrassment for the FBI. And they were given this information in that well-packaged, organized way to the Warren Commission. And that...
This interview also, this teletype also disappeared?
Well, I don't know. It wasn't that important to me. I saw it, and I didn't particularly like it. And I told in 1968, I told the United States Attorney and the FBI about that teletype too, and then not very much has been said about that.
Can you identify the agent it referred to?
No, I don't. I can't remember that. No.
What kind of response did you get from the U.S. Attorney when you presented this information to him in 1968?
Well, the response will vary depending upon who I talked to and what my concern was. The original concern was whether or not I knew all this information and how I got to know it. And the other thing was I going to submit to a subpoena if Jim Garrison at that time was very active in his investigation, then I was going to submit to a subpoena, and whether or not I was cooperating with Garrison, and whether or not I understood my rights, that I didn't have to reveal this kind of information to anyone under immunity, under government, I think it was executive privilege. And so he would advise me. I had an attorney present. As I recall, I sat with the United States Attorney and the Assistant USA in their New Orleans office for 4 hours in an interview, and I later found out through FOI information out of my file that none of them took one note. That they just didn't take any notes on it.
Did they indicate to you they were investigating?
They indicated to me that they were just trying to track down all the sources of information to cover themselves in case Garrison got hot on something, and they just wanted to know where everybody stood. And that was when the last thing I remember them telling me. So, well, good luck. And that was it. We walked out and they gave me $100 to go home. I'd taken 2 days off from work and lived in Nashville and ended up paying for my own airplane ticket and my attorney charges and everything.
Did they call you in?
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Did Jim Garrison investigators or Mr. Garrison in person ever contact you as to what you knew?
No, I never, during that period, I never talked to Jim Garrison. Just last year that I met Garrison, had dinner with him one evening, because he'd said so many things about me. I wanted to find out who it was that was doing it, and he asked me to have dinner with him.
Did he attempt to locate you?
I understand.
You as a witness?
Yeah, I understand.
With this investigation?
I was living in Nashville, and my attorney was not cooperating with him. I think they indicated, they felt that if they did subpoena me, I wouldn't say anything either. It was just another one of those non-credible witnesses that he was bringing in the court.
But today you're telling me that if the House Committee on Assassination would subpoena you to appear and give testimony and request all documents that you would comply.
No problem.
And produce all the documents that you have in your possession.
Correct.
Well, I thank you very much, Mr. Rose, for submitting to this interview. I do appreciate it. And that's all I have to break my home. Time, 12:20 p.m., February 27th, 78.